a lot of people don't.
I mean, Will is now too, of course, but
I got a good 20 years on Will at least. I might take the cake on that one. A lot of people don't realize that I'm a born and bred Kiwi, and very passionately and proudly so. I just got born into a situation where I've got now 4 passports in my hands, so I can sort of pick and choose a little bit. But I'm born and bred Kiwi, and I was just saying to Will before, one of the last things I ever did was when I was still living in New Zealand full time, was walk the Kepler track, which is one of the great walks of New Zealand, which hints into the Fiordland kind of ranges there, and it's sort of never sort of left me. Just what a magnificent space and place to sort of connect with and feel the resonance of, and just when you just look beyond into what's outward from there, it's such a mysterious, wild and just unforgiving and incredibly stunning sort of part of the world that just holds all this sort of mystery. It's the kind of place that just feels primordial and just beyond time. And I don't think there's too many places around that have held that for me in my journeys in my life. And I've been a few places. And
yeah, it's got a lot of similarities to some of the sort of wetter areas of Tasmania, but it's still got, I'd say it's almost amplified in that sense. Just has another level, I think, on Tasmania in some ways, certainly with the mossy trees and things like that.
It's sort of in a league of its own, I think, because of the fjords. It has a Norwegian kind of feel to it as well, which is nothing like anything in Australia has. And even there's nowhere else in New Zealand that has it. And it sort of holds this mythical place, and it has really interesting mythology and the Māori culture as well, and lots of different legends around it. But going back to just right now, Luke and I were running a little bit late because we were running around trying to find snow. We've had some of the biggest snow that's happened in sort of modern history that I'm aware of in Tasmania, and it all fell last night, and there were some beautiful shots very early yesterday, and Luke and I have been trying to tear it up to get our sense of not quite Fiordland, but something a bit wild and wintry, and we just kind of missed the boat because as soon as the snow fell, the rain started falling, and it was so heavy it shut down pretty much the entire of Tasmania last night, and just about every major highway in the entire state, all the way around the state, not even just pockets, was shut down. And Lukey was sitting there trying to do some work with no power in his house, and it was a pretty wild sort of night. And we had, what do you call it? Snow thunder.
Thunder snow, yeah.
Thunder snow.
I didn't even know that was a word. And so last night it was like, there's nothing falling, there's no rain, you just get these massive peals of thunder, and it's just the most eerie, bizarre combination of events. But in our case, what happened is we had the coldest air mass arrived before the precipitation did. So rather than the two together, in which case Luke and I would have been in heaven this morning, the two kind of didn't quite coincide. So we had the cold mass and a light snow the day before, and then when the heavy snow came, it all disappeared in the rainbow by the next morning. So it was just like,
yeah, it's a bit of a shame it didn't work out, but it's on the way to Will over there in New Zealand. I think he might get that in a few days, so hopefully he gets a little bit of snow out of it too. It was just saying a bit earlier that over there hasn't been as much snow as normal, Will.
Yeah, that's right. And it's really one of those things where you need to be at least a day ahead of it. We had a decent dump probably just over a week ago. And yeah, similar to you guys, I got out there and I managed to, they closed the roads off here as well. And I ended up being stuck between a closure at one end and then a closure at the other. And it was dumping real heavy. And I thought I could be here for overnight now, just stuck. But I managed to get out. All was good. But yeah, it's just been a bit of a leaner season. The base on most of the mountains is almost gone. You know, we had that big dump literally a week ago, and now there's not much left. Whereas typically you get the snow here on the peaks and it lasts for a good 4 or 5 months, but it just hasn't really settled that good yet. But it's only August, and typically here you get, you know, a late August and then a September dump from what I've seen. So we'll see. Like you said, it's on the way. There's something on the way next week as well. So
yeah, we gave a kick over your way, mate.
Yeah, it's on my radar. I was actually looking at it yesterday, like, okay, this could get something interesting coming along. So yeah, I don't make a decision until maybe 2 days out, and then you can really see what it's going to do. So
you're pretty considered that way in terms of you'll have a a thought process of where you'd like to go in advance, and then wait for the right weather system to come, and then once that's there, you just kind of go for it? Or do you have kind of a few ideas at the one time, and you'll sort of pick which one suits the conditions best?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I like to probably, I was thinking about this today, really be a bit more spontaneous with my photography. So, probably maybe a third of my imagery is planned. This is the shot, the composition, and just going there trying to get a specific image. But the other 2/3 is more going in a general area during the right occasion, whether it's light, a storm, a clearing storm, snow, etc., and then just kind of reacting off impulse and intuition, which is what I did last week with this dump. I knew the snow was coming, so I just put myself in an area where you can't really go wrong with the camera for a 50-kilometer stretch. So I just got in there with the snow and then spent 7 hours just back and forward. Whenever there was light opening one way, I'd drive down that way and walk, and then it would close off, and just playing around like that. And to me, that's probably the most enjoyable photography the last few years, is being just more spontaneous, because I feel like, when you really, and you guys would know this, when you get into the right place with the right conditions, you get in a flow state where you're not even consciously really thinking it. You're just doing it. You're just reacting on impulse. And to me, that's probably the most enjoyable photography. So yeah, even with this storm that's coming in, I'll just, there's so many ideas and options that I have here in the South Island in general. But it just comes down to duration. Can I hike in? Do I need to fly? Is it an aerial shoot? All those variables come into play, which will determine how to approach getting that specific photo or photographing that moment in time.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so because I guess you'd have a lot of spots to choose from as well, and I'm assuming that you might look at your portfolio and think, well, this is an area of Fiordland maybe I haven't got so many images from, and do you sort of try and balance it out so you have a nice sort of coverage of as much as you can?
Yeah, before COVID hit, I actually started a project. I was going to do a solo exhibition here and have one image for every fjord. So there's technically 14 fjords in Fiordland. And I've probably photographed maybe 10 of the 14, but I wanted to have all 14 photographed with a really solid image that, each held their own weight. And then we're going to do an exhibition and do a little mini documentary on making some of those shots. And then COVID shut it all down. So that's just going to be put on the back burner. But yes, there's definitely some areas that I haven't really got to at all and want to. But there's certainly parts of Fiordland that appeal to me much more than others, primarily because of the drama in the mountains. Northern Fiordland, the uplift of the mountains there is just much more dramatic. And then the further south you go, obviously the lower the mountains get. So for that reason, for me, I just haven't really explored so much of the southern sounds. They're called sounds, but they're all fjords. They're all glacially carved. So it's just an incorrect naming when the European guys came over here, and it's just stuck, which is kind of annoying because they're two completely different things in a geological sense. But yeah, there's just so much to do here. And then of course, the whole South Island's really the canvas that I work with as well. So probably the last 3 or 4 months, I've spent more time photographing the West Coast. So just going north of Fiordland and concentrating more on coastal meeting Southern Alps, which is just a really magical combination and quite unique. Absolutely. To have seascape with snow-capped mountains. So I've dedicated quite hundreds of hours actually made of back and forward, just trying to get a few images that I've had in mind for quite some time. So yeah, it's just a beautiful canvas to work with really. And you mentioned earlier as well about it being similar to Tasmania, and they do say it was all combined land at one stage, Gondwana land, and then all separated. So we've definitely got the similarities there with the beach forests and just that type of, craggy mountain landscapes and everything. So yeah, I always say to people, Tasmania is like the little brother of New Zealand, really. And if someone goes to Australia, I think Tasmania has got to be, the one spot to go to get that good variety of landscapes. For sure.
You've even got the possums as well. It's just
we've even got the they're an absolute pest. Yeah, they're not good over here.
Special gift from Australia, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just had a thought, guys. Some people might not have met Will before and know too much about him. Do we?
Yeah, no, it might be good.
Back step and maybe introduce them a bit more formally. And
Yeah, absolutely. I did sort of just jump right in there, but I guess I first came across Will's work obviously via Instagram, because Will's had, I guess, a lot of his, I think he sort of became a photographer via Instagram in a way, didn't you, Will, like by exploring and using that platform to kind of help you through some times in your life and that kind of thing. And you know, I was always following Will's adventures, like he was getting a lot of influencing work as well, and traveling around the world, and seeing all sorts of awesome places. So it was very cool to see what he was up to, and I always appreciated his ability to really distill the moment in words as well as his imagery. And so it was really awesome to see him then grow through his photography on Instagram, and then actually be able to take it full time, and in some way that sort of helped to inspire myself take a walk that way as well. And I think you know, through that, you know, he developed a passion for New Zealand, and then it was really awesome to see him move from Wollongong over to New Zealand with his family, which must have been a huge commitment to make. But obviously, when you love a place and it's almost a part of you, you know, you sort of know where you're meant to be. So I can certainly identify with that, having moved to Tassie. So Will's, yeah, a very talented photographer based over in you're in Te Anau, aren't you?
Yeah, Te Anau.
Te Anau, or yeah. And so over there, and he runs a lot of workshops over there. When people can travel, of course. And I think you've also got an online workshop as well, tutorial series as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's right, mate. Yep.
Yeah. So he's got a active that way, as well as sells a lot of prints. And you can probably add to what I've said there too, Will, in terms of what you've been up to.
No, that's all about right, mate. Like you said, I picked the camera up. It was late 2011 when I first. I grew up skateboarding. That was what I did as a teenager for 10 years. My life, everything out of high school was just skating all the time. And a big part of skateboarding is photography and video making. And I always had fun making videos with me and my mates, just filming and then editing it all. So I just developed that kind of creative outlet, but I wasn't interested in still photography at all. And just to cut a long story short, at one point when I got to my early 20s, I was looking for a friend's still photography, and he mentioned about an app or something. So I jumped on the app store, and this is back in 2011. So no one knew what Instagram was, or I don't even know if I had an iPhone then. I'm not sure what phone it was, but I downloaded Instagram, and because I searched photography in the app store and Instagram came up, and I downloaded it, and I quickly realized, this is not what my mate was referring to. I think he was referring to Flickr or something in hindsight. But I downloaded Instagram, and something about it was like, oh, this is kind of cool, because I wasn't on Facebook. Back then, everyone was on Facebook, and I was that one weirdo who refused to be on Facebook. So when I found Instagram, it resonated with me in the sense that it was, you know, it was kind of it was unknown, and I thought that was really interesting. So started using that, and then just with the iPhone, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll try and dust off the DSLR I had in the cupboard. We just had one, my wife and I, Canon 550D. We purchased when we went to Europe for a holiday. We thought, I better have a good camera, so we bought this camera. And saw a few landscape photos on Instagram and thought that looks like fun. So I just went out and tried it down at Wollongong there one day, and I was just instantly hooked. I just love the way that it gave me some motivation and inspiration to get out of bed, to get outside. And then, as everyone could probably relate to, it just changes the way you view the world. It just enhances everything and makes you appreciate all those finer details. So yeah, across the years, I was fortunate that I was on Instagram early, which allowed me to gain, you know, quite a big following back at the time. You know, I was probably the top 10 in Australia, just because it was such an early platform. There was maybe me and 5 or 6 other people that maybe had more than 20 or 30,000 followers, you know, including celebrities. It was just, no one was on there back in those early days. And that led me to start getting a few like influencer travel jobs, and essentially just to photograph landscapes and share, you know, my images of the location. And then as time went on, I started running workshops in Wollongong, selling prints. And then when my son was born at the end of 2014, it was basically a crossroad, because I was working full time as an air conditioning technician. So just, you know, 9 to 5, working a trade. Photography was getting fit in. before and after work because I just loved it. I was just obsessed with it. And then occasionally for any travel jobs, I'll just take annual leave and do those. And then when my son was born, it was like, wow, this is, life just gets so much busier, obviously. And something inside of me just said, you know what, I think I just needed a change in my life. And because life was so busy, I knew something had to give, and it was either back off the photography and basically forget about it so I could be a committed father, or maybe throw in the job that I really wasn't content with and pursue this photography, which has just given me so much and enrich my life in so many ways. And it was a scary decision because you've got, my wife did work, but she quit her job to be a full-time mum. And now I've got a newborn son, and now suddenly I'm going to quit a stable career of 8 years to pursue landscape photography of all things. But it didn't sit right with me to say, you know what, that was fun, but I'll let it taper off and I'll get my head down and just, keep doing what I was doing. So yeah, I ended up quitting in 2014 to primarily run workshops full time. And to this day, that's where the most of my income is coming from, running workshops in obviously New Zealand and Australia and Iceland and all those fun places that us photographers like to go to. And and then still selling prints, obviously, and doing online video tutorials and all that type of stuff. But it's been a big journey. And, my passion probably in the last 3 years, I only picked the camera up, say, 8 years ago. I feel like it's taken me 5, almost 6 years to really figure out, or to learn to be a photographer and create images that I feel like, what are achieving what I feel and see. It takes a long time to get to that point. And it's probably only been the last 2.5, 3 years that I feel like, okay, this is really what I want to do and the images I want to create. And even with my business model, I don't do influencer work or anything like that anymore. It's just my passion is for teaching and for wilderness and capturing wilderness and the type of images that I make now and that you see from me. That's really just the stuff I like to do. So it's been an interesting journey, and I'm sure there'll be more changes along the way, even at the moment, of course, with COVID and everything. But yeah, it's just been, photography, I always say to people, it's just such a good hobby because it does change the way you view the world and view yourself, and nature just teaches us so many different lessons every day. So it's very inspiring.
Sure it does. And I guess you must be quite grateful that you're in a good place in terms of being in New Zealand and this I guess the situation that the COVID was treated very seriously there in the lockdown, and now I imagine your lifestyle over there is relatively unimpeded.
Yeah, it's a real blessing now to be able to just hit the road and do whatever you want. It's just like life continues on. You don't even think about COVID. The only time you think about COVID, unfortunately, is just because businesses are really struggling, because all these towns here in the South Island are based off running with mass tourism. So whether it's the local grocery store or the fish and chip shop, just everyone's just, on the books, they're down 50, 80% almost. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people are getting unemployed and closing up, and that's been tough to see, and it's going to be harder as the months roll on. But aside from that, as a photographer especially, it's awesome to be able to just get out and, keep creating, keep exploring, just getting back to, the stuff that really fulfills me and everything. So, yeah, it's interesting times, though, that's for sure.
Your business should be quite affected, though, from COVID. Yeah,
mate. So myself personally, I had the entire 2020 calendar year booked out since January. So if someone wanted to do a workshop, it was almost impossible to get someone in, even with a private workshop, kind of struggling to find dates for people and things like that. And the way I run my workshops, which most people would, is, you take a deposit and then people pay in installments and then they do their workshop, obviously. So I've literally had the whole year now is not possible. We're doing it month by month at one stage, but now it's obviously the whole year. And it's, it's pretty challenging when, people's deposits and installments, it doesn't just sit in a little pile for when the workshop happens. That's how I feed the family and everything like that. So now having to contact 60 plus individuals, and thankfully pretty much 99% of people have been happy to shuffle to something next year, pick a date, any workshop, let's just make it happen. But yeah, now it means for this year that income is more or less completely stopped, and now next year is full of people who have paid 12 to 24 months beforehand. And anyway, yeah, I don't want to go into it too much, but it's been challenging, and yeah, and that's going to be harder even next year, just because of the fact that, you know, most of those clients they paid, or at least half paid. It's very messy, put it that way. It's yeah, it's tough time, but I'm grateful that I work in an industry where there is some room to adapt, whether it's doing online tutorials, selling prints. I can still do one-on-one workshops here with Kiwis, which there's not many, especially because most of my clients just are from Australia typically. But at least I have that room to do something still, whereas there's people here that have lost their job for a job of maybe 20 plus years, and now they're unemployed and there's no work going, and that's the end of that's the end of the road. So I'm not I can't complain at all. You know, it's tough, but it could be a lot worse, that's for sure.
No, that's definitely I guess a positive way to look at it.
Yeah, you got to look at the positives, I guess.
Yeah, and it really does make you pivot and look a bit more online and what else you can do in that space, so that you can still you know, get out there and still reach people, but you know, and get to them where they are rather than them coming to you, I suppose.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, it would just make it much more sweeter when people can finally come over. I'm getting messages from, you know, past people that are meant to be coming on trips, and they're just like, they just can't wait. And I'm like, yeah, when you can finally get here, it's just going to be that much more enjoyable. So I'm sure everyone's looking forward.
I saw a rumor the other day of a Tassie New Zealand travel bubble. I don't know if that's going to eventuate. I'm assuming that New Zealand's they're only going to open up, I think, to the whole country when it happens. But that would be it would be nice to at least have some part of somewhere at least able to travel there.
Yeah, even WA as well. You know, WA's been on top of it, but from what I'm hearing, it's the whole country on nothing at all. And Jacinda said yesterday or the day before that they want 28 days COVID-free cases in Australia before it can be considered. So that's not happening this year at all. Like, you could pretty much guarantee that. So we're in it for the long haul, you know. And this initially we were playing it month by month, thinking, okay, maybe the July school holidays there could be, or maybe September, and now it's just like, forget about it, unfortunately. So yeah, but
it's given you time for some personal stuff that you wouldn't have otherwise had time to do, though.
Yeah, definitely being able to definitely being able to chase the weather a lot more, and pursue photography ideas that I've had, because when I run a workshop, I'm away for a week, for example. Then I want to make sure I'm home for a good 2 to 3 weeks, and during that time I'll be doing other little bits and pieces, but I wouldn't be able to just always take off because to pursue ideal conditions anyway. So it's definitely, I like to release new images every 3 to 4 months. So I'm always shooting all the time, pretty much, you know, whenever there's conditions and I can pursue some idea, and then I'll release maybe 30 or so images 4 times a year, roughly every quarter. And I'm going to release some new ones next week. And it's everything that I've been doing since April, essentially, since the lockdown ended. And I'd say almost every shot in this collection that I'll put out soon I just feel is almost a personal favorite. And a lot of it is because I've had that flexibility again to really just go above and beyond and explore and hike a bit more than I normally would, and just dedicate a bit more time to the personal photography. So yeah, it has been a good blessing in that regard for sure. And looks like I've got the whole rest of the year now to do that. So might as well take advantage of it.
Just on the releasing of the images, there are other people that sort of do that in blocks. What's the reason for releasing the whole heap at once?
Mate, years ago, I would go to shoot a sunrise at the beach, get home, maybe edit it, and then share it that night, you know, that type of thing. And I guess I've only been doing this for maybe 2.5, 3 years now, but I just started to you know, social media is a bit of a machine where it's like, you can't ever fill it up. It's always hungry. And I just felt like it was starting to take away from what photography is to me. And that was one of the reasons why I stopped doing the influencer stuff as well, where I was thrust into a scenario. I actually had a Tassie trip one year with Tourism Tassie, and it rained literally every day. No light, but I still had obligations to share X amount of photos. So anyway, long story short, I just feel like by taking my time I'm really able to reflect upon the work that I share, process it, properly the way I want to, and just remove that any sense of urgency. And I feel like I always say it's like music, if I like when a band works on an album for a year or two, for example, and when it comes out, you just can't wait to consume the whole thing from front to back. But if a band is trying to put out a new single every week or every second week, it gets to the point where you're not really appreciating. It just starts to sound the same after a while. The quality probably goes downhill because they're trying to turn over stuff all the time. So for me personally, I just felt like with my photography, if I just slow down and really put more time and effort into the images I'm making, then I feel like I'm just raising the bar and quality for myself. So that's the way I like to do it. And then I can just direct people to the website to try and have a look and read through it all in one sitting or whatever it takes, instead of just trickling stuff out. I don't know.
I do like that, how it there's quite often as a photographer, there's not apart from maybe a blog, there's not always a great need, or there's nothing really to direct people to a website generally. So by releasing that body of work, at least then you're getting people going there. I know I certainly do. Whenever you do a big release like that, I always look forward to it and going through all of the shots, and it's definitely a nice way of seeing those images, because you can also present them a little larger on your website as well, in the right orientation and format, and that
because
kind of thing.
Social media, let's just say Instagram, because that's where most users are, unfortunately, it is absolutely terrible for landscape photography. Like, you can't even view a horizontal image full size. It's just ridiculous. And then of course the forced cropping and everything like that. So at least this way, everything can be displayed properly and viewed how it probably should be. Whereas if you're doing a new image every week, it would get a bit tiresome saying to people, please go to the website to check it out. You'd get over that. So at least it's like, all right, let's just do it in one go. Just as if you were sitting down with a new record with a cup of coffee, putting the headphones on and enjoying an album from front to back. That's kind of the approach. And look, maybe I'm romanticizing the whole thing. I guess it's just the way that I like to view other people's art or imagery, whatever it is. I like to just take my time and view it properly and things like that. So even if there's only, a small fraction of people that view the images that way, that really means a lot to me. And I know there is, because the people, like yourself, have said stuff like that. So
no, it's definitely a nice it's definitely food for thought for myself included, and also just it's nice that you are actually putting that level of thought into your image making and trying to almost create not necessarily a series of images though, are they? They're different. It's just more just the body of work for a period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's still quite nice to see where you are and in your journey and what you're focusing on in terms of that work as well. So, and there's always a nice smattering of aerial and as well as land-based stuff as well, which is always good. So
and now, like, coming through winter here, like this release I'll put out next week, hopefully there's going to be more snow shots, and so there's always a little bit of a theme to a degree. But it's not like there's a common, I'm doing glaciers this month and leaves next month, whatever it is. It's always just a mix of whatever I've been up to. But I do also consider a little bit like, all right, I've already got 3 or 4 shots of that area. I might do that next year now. And I try to have a bit of variety in there, definitely. But it just comes down to what I've been up to for that 3 to 4 month period. And so this time it was definitely the West Coast. There's a lot of West Coast stuff in there, which I'm excited to share. So.
It seems like I was only on the West Coast in February, and I think you really have to know where to go along there, because the highway basically just rips right past it, and I'm sure I knew that I'd probably be flying past all sorts of good stuff there, but without knowing how to get down there, or even like some of the classic places like Mochikaiki Rocks and that kind of thing, you really kind of have to do a bit of research to work out how to get out to those sort of spots. And I'm sure you're talking about spots that are much further south as well. So but that's I guess gives you the opportunity then to shoot some spots that not many other people would really get to. So that's always a nice, I certainly think about that too from Tassie perspective, in terms of finding a location, or at least shooting a place in a way that may not have been shot before, because as a photographer, you're always trying to find something that's a little bit unique and different, because otherwise you don't want to be regurgitating something that has been done before if you can help it. I think naturally you do that a little bit, but it's nice to have a bit of your own influence there too.
Yeah, well, I couldn't help, I do romanticize stuff a lot. I always think back to the early explorers and, the Māori people. I just think, man, the West Coast of New Zealand, to have the Southern Alps and Mount Cook and Tasman so close to the ocean. Like, it's such an incredible combination, but I realized that I hadn't really seen a shot of Mount Cook with the ocean in it, even though it's right there. And it's for a good reason. It's very hard to do that. There's not many places where you can stand at the beach and look at Mount Cook. So that's what I dedicated some of these images to, is looking for areas along the coastline where maybe I could line up shorelines with the mountains and things like that. Because, yeah, and I get obsessed with ideas and trying to try stuff. One of these shots was there's like an 8-hour drive to get there, and then 8 hours back, and it took 3 attempts across 2 months, because you'd go up there and then the weather window would just shut down suddenly and it'll be gone for a week. That's just what the West Coast does. So there's no point hanging around. So I'd go back home, and then so some of them are like that, and then as photography works out, sometimes you get lucky in other shots. One of the last one I did recently up there, it's a similar scenario. It's a 7.5 hour drive, a 2K walk. I had to pack raft across a river outlet that was going into the ocean, like a bit more in-depth stuff. And then bang, just got the shot that exact afternoon and then went home. So it's, I love that about photography though.
I've had a few experiences like that recently too, where you put all the planning into it, and because you've put so much thought and planning in, you can almost execute that plan like clockwork, and you just sort of get the shot you envisaged and then go home. It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
The conditions often get in the way, but when you do have that level of planning in advance, it can certainly increase your chances a hell of a lot. Do you do a lot of planning with apps or anything like that?
Mainly just topographic map and Google Earth as well.
Okay.
So Topo Map really helps me just if I'm tramping, hiking, get an idea of, all right, what's these inclines going to be like if I have to bush bash and things like that. And then Google Earth obviously dramatically helps get an idea of how the mountains are going to align or whatever, because with Fiordland in particular, it's just, there's no imagery of the stuff that I've been photographing since I've moved here. You can't just Google a certain mountain and see another photo pop up. It just doesn't exist. So the best thing I can do is really just go off the maps and Google Earth and get an idea. And I do a lot of aerial photography here too. So of course, just getting that top down perspective, whether it's the map or Google Earth, it really helps to understand which way fjords will run, bodies of water, river curves and everything like that. And then just for the sunrise stuff, I use photographers ephemeris, just mainly to check where the moon or sunrise, sunset direction would be. And that's about all.
Have you ever used TPE 3D?
No, I haven't. No.
You might appreciate that if you haven't heard of that one, because it's a bit like Google Earth, that you can actually see a sort of a topographical view of the land, but you can actually place yourself in that location and even choose what focal length you want to use, how the light's actually going to move over the mountains at
that's handy.
twilight, and it's actually pretty amazing. So I definitely, it's very expensive. I think it's about $30 for the app, but for what you can get out of it, it's well worth having a look into.
Yeah, interesting. I will check that out.
It's only available on iOS, unfortunately, but I believe you're an Apple guy. So,
yeah, that's all right for me.
Yeah, so it's well worth a look, including everybody else out there too. It's only useful in certain situations, more so where you're really trying to line up a mountain or trying to get, maybe looking for twilight or alpenglow and those sort of conditions. It also does Milky Way very well for myself. So, but yeah, it's certainly if you're doing that really advanced sort of planning and maybe going to put 8 hours driving into it, to actually know what focal length you would probably need when you get there is pretty amazing. So those kind of things are pretty cool. Yeah. We've just got a question actually. If you've ever met up with Andres Apps from Ocarito.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Andy's work. One of his books is right here, actually, the Fiordland one. And I was at Ocarito last month and just chatting with mutual friends. Where I live in Te Anau, Andy's done so much photography here for the last 30 years. So I have a lot of mutual acquaintances and helicopter pilots, and everyone's always saying, have you met Andy yet? And just all these people. And I just didn't want to be that guy that contacts him out of the blue and says, oh, I'm a photographer too. Can I meet you? You know what I mean? But I happened to be at Ocarito recently and had that similar scenario come up, and one of his good friends said, no, trust me, he's home right now. I'll call him now. And I was like, all right, I just don't want to just be one of those guys that, I'm in your area, can I meet you? But yeah, ended up just saying g'day anyway and check out his gallery. And then, once we got going, he made a coffee for me and we sat down, and I could have sat there all day actually. So it was nice to finally meet him. And I don't think it'll be the last time because, just looking at his imagery, I resonate a lot with more so his passion and the dedication he's put into his wilderness photography. So, I think hopefully we might meet again and maybe even do a bit of a trip one time. So we'll see.
Well, I actually had a similar experience. So in February when I was I actually did what you said. I was passing through Okarita and I thought, oh, bugger it, I'll just send him. I think I actually called up and said, I might as well try my luck. And he just happened to be home. And yeah, he was so friendly. I would imagine that he would meet anybody that wanted to chat. To be honest, he was just that kind of bloke. And his work's just absolutely stunning in print. I really did want to see it in print because you can see it in a book, but to see it actually in print and on the wall and him talking about it there and was really brilliant. So, and I believe he's moving actually now to
Christchurch.
Near across the other side. Yeah. So. So it's a bit of a bummer for people that like the West Coast there, but I think he sort of indicated that to me at least that it's more around just trying somewhere new and that
and just closer to resources and family and things like that.
It is a pretty
remote
sort of
where
area.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and certainly incredibly inspiring photographer, and he's been around for a long time. So
yeah, absolutely.
There's also got some of his work, I think, in a hotel not far from Okarita as well.
Yeah, they have a bit of they call it a gallery, and I pulled in one time and I didn't realize what they did was just put the photos in the dining area where people have their breakfast. So I went in one morning to look at the photos and I didn't realize I had to, the photos there, but then there's people below eating their breakfast. So I was like, this is a bit awkward. I'll come back another time. But seeing imagery in print is just, it's something else really. It's just takes it to a whole new level to be in tangible form and everything like that. It's something I want to concentrate a bit more on in the coming years, I think.
Do you print your own work, Will?
No, I've always outsourced it to a guy in Australia since day one, and he just does such a stellar job, and I always just go through him to this very day. Really happy, and he ships it for me and does it all. So yeah, that's it's hard because he's in Australia, and whenever I send prints out now, I just don't even get to see them. I used to love when I lived there, and I'd go and hand sign them and get to review them, and it's just so nice. It's the end result really, but I haven't been able to do that for quite some time. So sometimes I'll say to him, just send me an iPhone photo of it or something like that. But yeah.
Do you ever get requests to sign and they have to actually post it to you first and then on from there? Or
if someone definitely wants a hand signed, I'll we have to do it that way. It's the only way to get around it. But just haven't found anyone in South Island that can really give me the same result and service. Not yet anyway. Haven't given up, but still looking.
Yeah, it's one of those things, printing, isn't it, where there's a bit of a you have to invest reasonable amount to get into it, and then you can really only print certain sizes unless you really want to invest in it. Just the shipping, like a lot of my stuff is going overseas, and just the fine handling of it all, rolling it up, packaging, tubing. For me, I just rather let a professional do it. And I don't know, it's hard enough being a full-time photographer as it is, trying to, run a business and be a social media manager and, making online tutorials where you're now a video editor and a videographer. It's like, geez, I just want to just go out in the bush and feel the rain on my face with the camera in hand. I don't want to be doing all this other stuff. So I had to draw the line somewhere. And like I said, this guy just does such a good job and the pricing's good. So I just keep using him.
It's a special thing to have the kind of relationship with the printer that you trust them that implicitly that they'll send out your work without even being able to see it. And I have that, and Luke's sort of begun to have that as well. I think here in Tassie with one guy.
Definitely.
It's just gold, and it's almost like you've got to have a good reason to break away.
Well, there's a link there, Photomart. That's Brent. So Brent owns Photomart, and that's who I use. And yeah, I met Brent when he was working out of his garage, and now he's got 6 full-time staff and takes care of Ray Collins and Warren Keelan, and lots of other professional photographers. So he's just, there's a plug for Brent there. Only because I saw the link come up down the bottom there. Someone put in the chat.
Oh, no, you feel free to plug anything you like.
Yeah.
He's totally open like that.
He resonated with me a lot in the beginning because he would call me, and this is back in the early days, and he would just call and say, hey, I was going to do this print for you, but I can see there's a dust spot, or, your blacks are a bit dark here, and just little things like that. And I was like, wow, if you went to another place, they just printed and too bad, mate. This is your result. This is what you gave us. Whereas Brent, he is a photographer at heart, and he used to have his own photography galleries. So he's just got that eye for it, and he's got the passion. So if he sees something that he knows, shouldn't be there, he'll call you up and tell you. And the other thing is the color calibration. I just know that the result, what I see on my monitor is what comes out of his printer. And that's what I've struggled to find here in the South Island, just getting test prints done, and the colors are different. And it's like, man, I don't have time to muck around with this. And maybe it's even more expensive than what Brent's charging me as well, and the results aren't right. So it's just been easier to keep using Brent. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, essentially.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's a good motto. Well, one thing, like you've obviously made this huge move, and I'm guessing Luke knows the story behind it, but I certainly don't, and I'm sure most of the audience doesn't. It's a very significant shift to fairly remote part of New Zealand. People don't know the area. It's kind of like right at the bottom, and with a hard right turn, sort of dead end.
Pretty much. That's a good idea.
I'll pull the map up here.
And yeah, we haven't seen any pictures of it either, so that might be nice.
Yeah, that's it. We should probably get into that too.
Yeah. So, mate, I started coming here 2014 to the South Island, and when I did, I was like, why did I wait this long to come over? Because my wife and I went to the States and the Canadian Rockies and Egypt and Europe, and New Zealand was always like, nah, we'll do it one day. It's too close to Australia. And then when I finally came here, it just resonated with me big time. And then over the years, as I got more serious about photography, and then obviously started doing it full time, New Zealand just felt like home, more so than Australia, particularly Fiordland. So this map here is based, Te Anau is where I live. So right here, most people would be familiar with Queenstown over here, and then Milford Sound, famous Milford Sound's up the top. So if you ever go to Milford or if you ever go to Milford at all using a road, you have to
long way around.
You have to pass through Te Anau, yeah. So Te Anau has maybe got a population of about 3,000 people where we live here in the area generally, and for me it was just the right size community, mate. Just going to New Zealand, Iceland, Patagonia. Whenever I'd go back to Australia where I lived in Wollongong, it felt like a rat race. I just felt like it was too loud and busy. And it sounds silly, but I just didn't feel like I fit there anymore. And once I started taking this area seriously with Fiordland, looking into it from a photography perspective and then living perspective, it just felt like home before it ever actually became home. And I couldn't shake that thought. So we moved here in 2017, I think, 2017. So it's coming up 3 years now. And yeah, we just haven't looked back. It's been a real blessing. And, even if you remove the photography, I'd still be here because it's just, there's so much more here that we enjoy, the small community lifestyle, and, being able to look at the mountains and just to get into nature with the kids and all that type of stuff. And the little saying here, and it's very true, it's Te Anau, it might not have everything you want, but it's got everything you need. So everything we need right here. And if we ever need anything more, let's, for example, say Kmart, which my wife loves, we just go up to Queenstown and spend a day in Queenstown, or get a hotel and spend a night there with the kids.
Sounds pretty rough.
Yeah, it's a rough, tough gig. So, my drive to Queenstown is 2 hours. When I was in Wollongong, to get to the airport was about an hour and a half. But this type of driving was dramatically more stressful doing the Wollongong to Sydney run, whereas when I do my Te Anau to Queenstown run for an airport or whatever it is, it's just so peaceful and relaxing, and I just don't even get tired of doing it. And I even drove into Milford this afternoon before we kick this off, and that's an hour and a half if you don't stop, and it's just such an enjoyable driving around here in the South Island in general. So yeah,
it's one of my favorite drives in New Zealand for sure. That road's just magic.
That drive is one of the most beautiful drives in this part of the world.
Oh, how's it going, by the way, Will? Because even when I was over there, that's when you got the huge rainfall and it washed a lot of it out. Is it all back to normal now?
They're still working. It's open, but
Yeah.
they're still working on it. But yeah, that rainfall we got in February, I went in to photograph that storm that was coming in, and I ended up, there was basically a forecasting about 350 mil for the Sunday, but that's nothing. Like, I've been in there at 250 mil, that type of thing. So when 350 was starting to look like the occasion, I was like, oh, this is going to be good, because I just love photographing the storms and the waterfalls and everything we get in Fiordland. So I headed in on the Sunday, planning to overnight, because the Monday morning was looking good as well for this 350 mil. And yeah, to cut it short, mate, 1,000 mil came in on that storm, completely unprecedented. It destroyed all the roads. I woke up, I was at Guns Camp, which is an old 1950s campsite down the Hollyford Valley. And I woke up to the sound of dripping water at 7 a.m. That just didn't sound right. And when I opened the window, the Hollyford River was now at my windowsill instead of being 20 meters away. So things escalated quickly, and I ended up getting a helicopter evacuated out of there, as well as 20 other people. And it was just a wild scenario. And yeah, the road is still, to this day, they're still working on it. Mainly now they're using diggers and trying to redirect and create little like boundaries for the river. So when it does start to flood again, it'll have a bit more of a course that steers away from the road.
Flood mitigation, yeah.
Yeah.
Was your car all right?
So I got out of that camp, the Guns Camp, out of the valley, and I had to drive through a pretty sketchy slip coming down a mountain, and then no one else was able to get out. They were all in different vehicles, all these other people that were there. And then I was kind of stranded. I tried to go towards the Homer Tunnel and ended up seeing the Hollyford River floating across the road about 12 feet higher than it normally is. And I thought, okay, think about this, because you might not make it home today type scenario, and I ended up getting stuck at the divide where the route burn track ends, and the car had to stay there for about 8 or 9 days until I could finally get in again before they could clear the road up to that point. And then I got the car out, and then it took them 6 weeks to actually get it opened for bus traffic and just one-way convoys, and then COVID hit. So yeah, it's been a rough season here, and they're still working on the road today, just still doing repairs and everything like that. But you can still use it. But the things I saw on that morning was a combination of pure terror, but pure admiration for the power of nature. 1,000 mil. So one of the guys I spoke to has worked here for 25 years on the Milford Road, and he said he's never seen anything like it. And they had no idea it was going to do. I remember looking at the sky that morning as it was dumping, and it was just, it's hard to explain the amount of moisture that was just falling from the sky. When I woke up that morning, it was just unbelievable. But it's things like that that actually inspire me even more, just to get out there. I love the way the landscape here wears the weather. It just suits that type of dramatic, violent scenery. So
yeah, I certainly appreciate the shots you have where you've got, torrential water just coming down the sides of the fjords and that kind of thing. It does show really the power of nature and what can actually happen out there, and how much it's got to be one of the wettest places in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, Milford itself they call it one of the wettest. Average 8 to 10 meters per year with rainfall. So yeah, like, in all honesty, if it's a day where it's maybe 150, 200 mil, that's just like, cool. This will be a productive day and we should see some nice stuff. So yeah, if it's anything less than that, sometimes it's not worth going in.
Well, rain's a huge part of what you got to contend with, no matter where you go in that kind of area, and you spend a lot of time in it and you're trying to shoot. Do you have any sort of specific ways of coping and shooting in such wet conditions?
Well, I shoot exclusively handheld, so that really helps because you're not trying to set a tripod up, and we can talk about that later. But so being handheld means you can just quickly pull the camera up, get a shot, put it away. And the main and only tool I use, and I know people are going to say, oh, but you can buy these rain covers, and I'll cut it short, I'm lazy. That's why I don't use a tripod or filters or anything. And all I use is a microfiber towel, which is for camping. It's like a body-sized towel, and I just throw that over the camera. So that's kind of covering it. I can get my shots. I can quickly cleanse the lens if I need to, and that's all I'm really doing, to be honest. And then just head to toe and Gore-Tex and waders. Waders are a really good friend of mine as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it, mate. I'm just not afraid. One of my cameras lasted 3 years in shooting these types of conditions around the world, Patagonia, Iceland, and they can definitely take a pretty good beating, the Sony A7R models. As much hate as they get, I can't complain about the
it's
mine.
Definitely one of the things that come up when people have try to go to the laundry list of things that aren't good about them. But I've never experienced anything like that with anything.
I know. I don't even bother defending it because I just know personally what mine has endured, some of the models. And the Mark II I had for 3 years, and I started thinking, I can't kill this thing. Like, I didn't even care. I was like, I don't care if it dies now, but it's just not dying. It went to Patagonia 3 times, Iceland 8 times, all through, what I do here, all the conditions. And I'm really rough with the gear. And I'm like, this thing just does. And it still actually works to this day. It just, corrosion started to get the better of it. Yeah. But mate, they're pretty tough, from my experience anyway.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the way. Although the battery life part was definitely true.
On the Mark II,
definitely
was
addressed that. Yeah,
definitely.
And I found the color a bit challenging on the Mark II as well.
Yeah, they really improved the color science between the Mark II and Mark III. And it's interesting. They're saying now with the A7S III, they've done even more with the color science on that one. So it'd be interesting. It's more for video, of course, but it'll be interesting to see if they translate that to some of the newer camera releases as well. So it's always improving, and the new menus will be quite nice to have. And the flip screen I'm very keen on too, for portrait shots and things like that.
Did they change the menu? Did they?
Yeah, there's a brand new menu in the A7S III, and it's a touchscreen menu, and so it's got full touchscreen use now. And I'm really hoping you can actuate the shutter using touchscreen, which is a function I really would like to have if I forget my remote and want to do bulb mode or something like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. There's a few little tweaks like that, which would be really nice.
Yeah, definitely. So
I've got a video here to share just on the topic of rain if you want.
Yeah,
I'll just try and open it. This is just some GoPro footage of one of the hikes I did one time with a mate. I'll just try and share it here. Just bear with me. Just to show people, I do a lot of aerial work and even using helicopters to. Now, when I say that, it's not happening every week, that's for sure. There might be 6 times a year where I'll use a helicopter to maybe land somewhere, maybe not even that often. And one of the reasons is Fiordland is just so thick with dense bush, and also the mountains are very steep as well. It's not a matter of, just climb up a mountain. It's just physically, it's just not possible half the time. You need a 20-day window to get one image. This is actually part of an old trail to show people how it can look. This is just a normal day, normal on the trail, and these are conditions that you can endure. So this is my friend here, and it's similar to what you get in Tassie, just having to pull people out of. This is and it was just 3 hours of this type of stuff, just pulling each other in and out and wearing the waders for essentially 10 kilometers, which I don't recommend doing, but that's the type of scenery. I've got one more I'll just quickly show you just while we're on the topic there, just so people get an idea of the type of terrain that you can have here. Here it is. I'll just share this one with you now. This is more so showing when you go off trail, which is pretty much the majority of what I do, the boulders and the dense bush here. So this is me now. I've just taken a tumble. So I gave the GoPro to my friend. I said, just show. So this is one time where I wanted to get a shot that involved maybe 4Ks just going off a trail. And the final 1 kilometer was essentially just this type of environment, whereas boulders, and you couldn't see the gaps between the boulders there. So you'd be walking along bush bashing, and then suddenly just plummet down, where 2 boulders wedged together, and
the vegetation's growing up.
So the vegetation's covered it all over, and 1 minute you're fine, and then the next minute you just plummet down a huge gap. So, but that is just atypical Fiordland, scenery and environment to have to be photographing in if you want to get off the beaten path, so to speak. So it's definitely yields its challenges, and that's why sometimes using a helicopter or just capturing things from the air, it just makes so much more sense than trying to commit 14 days to doing some bush bashing and things.
It's definitely it would be many trade-offs there, and it's certainly something that I think about a lot in the sense that it's an option for you to do, because here in Tassie, obviously, it's they're very much against doing that kind of thing. But as you mentioned, you sort of do it in moderation. It's not like every time you're heading out, you're using a chopper to get there.
And the fact that there is restrictions here too. So Department of Conservation, who oversees the national parks, so helicopter companies, they need permits to land anywhere, just like I need permits to run workshops. So there's definitely a lot of places where I've said, can we land here? And it's just like, nah, can't land there, not allowed, that type of scenario.
Okay.
But there's enough that, yeah, you can still get to some good stuff, or you can just hover a helicopter, 6 feet from the ground, and, you can kind of get a perspective that you're after. But yeah, no, they're pretty big still on that. One of the things that opened up helicopters here was the deer hunting that they did in the 70s, because they introduced deer here in the early 1900s, and they just went crazy in the numbers and started destroying all the vegetation. So hunting from helicopters became a very successful way to cull down those numbers. And then that just opened up the door for using helicopters in Fiordland in general, because that all ties into conservation by wiping the deers out to help protect the plants and everything. So I think over time, they're slowly, tightening the notches on where you can land and what you can do. But yeah, you can still definitely find places where it's okay to land and, get picked up in a few days' time or whatever. And the other thing I use as well is just, if you need to use a boat or something, so getting a boat down a fjord or a float plane landing in a fjord, then you go on trail from there. Because I'll just pull that map up again one last time and just show you kind of where I'm talking about and where some of the photography is done. I'll just, 1 second. It's not coming up as an option. Just bear with me. So there we go. So yeah, like I said, I live in Te Anau. And then the main thing that people are photographing in Fiordland is Milford Sound, which is up here. And then you've got the road that runs between Te Anau and Milford, and there's a lifetime of photography there, and a lot of my images are made on the side of the road, or 500 meters, a kilometer just off the edge of the road. But if you look at how expansive Fiordland is, it's huge. It's the biggest national park in New Zealand, and there's just so much pure wilderness out here. There's only a handful of tracks as well. You've got the George Sound track, Dusky track. And when I say track, that's like the footage I showed you earlier where you're swimming half the time, it's not really a track. But then all these other areas, there's just thousands of mountains in here and rivers, and yourself with photography and particularly mountains, there might just be one specific angle where it just aligns perfectly. And outside of that angle, it doesn't work at all. So I can just look at the map as I do, every day, and always just coming up with new ideas or places I want to maybe check out. And it's just a never ending source of inspiration for me. The fact that there's so much out here that's just fresh, and that's always appealed to me. Even when I was in Australia, a lot of the seascapes I was shooting, I'm not saying I pioneered anything by any stretch of the imagination, but because I got into photography before social media really took off, I couldn't see 100 photos of Cathedral Rocks and Bombo Quarry because there just wasn't any where I was looking. So when I first went to those places, and I went there just via word of mouth from locals and things, I was seeing stuff for the first time, like literally ever. It wasn't like, oh, that's what I saw in the photo. I was just looking at it going, wow, like I grew up in the area. I lived my whole life in the Illawarra. And that feeling is stuck with me to this day, that feeling of excitement that you get when you're just beholding, that discovery, and it's what drove all the early explorers. It didn't matter whether it was down in Antarctica, America, whatever. It's that sense of wanting to just push further around the corner, because there's that question of, but what if around here, this looks like that, or, and to this day now, I've just got this palette to work with, which is just, it's literally endless. And the main challenges are time and budget, essentially, because, the time to do things on foot and get the right conditions is just, incredibly time consuming. And then to utilize, an aircraft or a boat or something becomes very expensive. So it's definitely a lifelong project, and just slowly been chipping away over the last few years. And it doesn't get old though, that's for sure. Yeah,
and I can see there too that where you live is quite central as well in terms of the whole Fiordland as well. It's sort of really well placed to.
Yeah, Te Anau, it's called the gateway to Fiordland. So we literally, Lake Te Anau is a part of the national park, and the lake for me is about a 3-minute walk from the house. So yeah, it's a shame. I wish they just called it Fiordland or something instead of Te Anau, because it really is the heart and soul of Fiordland. That's where all the locals live. Anyone that works in Fiordland essentially lives here in Te Anau. And yeah, it's just right there. right in the backyard. So
maybe we'll get you to pull up some images and talk about those.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, definitely. Now, look, I've just thrown a random selection in here. So there's no rhyme or reason or order to any of these shots. And I'll just, share a few insights into any image, and feel free to just ask any questions as I run through.
Absolutely. And that goes for the audience, of course, as well. If you've got any questions for Will, please, and on YouTube as well, just ask away.
This is one of the first aerials I ever shot in Fiordland, 2016, I think it was. And yeah, it was just...
What are the main choppers you use out there?
So not using choppers much at all because it's just so expensive, and
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so mainly using Cessna 172 small aircraft. So 4 seats basically, me and the pilot, and then there's 2 seats in the back.
Just the window or doors off?
Window pops completely out, and then the wind holds the window under the wing essentially because it's on a hinge. So if I want to do a shoot, I just pop it out, and then you can let go of the window and it stays out, and then you've got literally, a 30-inch wide hole to shoot through. The only thing you have to work around is the strut.
Yes.
And then the wing as well. But I've just done it so much now that it's just not really an issue because you're not doing wide angle photography out of a plane. Typically, you're more doing 35 mil up to 400 mil, for example.
What's your focal length on a shot like this? Because I find 50 mil fits between the gaps quite well, but it's
something like this is off the top of the head. I think, say 50 to 70, something like this. So yeah, it doesn't really matter too much. And I've been able to form a really good relationship here with various pilots, helicopter guys, as well as light aircraft guys up around the Mount Cook area too. And what I mean by good relationship is that they know how I work. And the challenge with aerial photography is that you've removed your ability to compose the shot independently. We're so used as photographers to go, okay, I want to go left and right, up and down, and you can tweak your composition. But when you're in an aircraft going 130 kilometers an hour, and suddenly you need to just be tilted down lower or, a bit higher, you can't do it. And you got to have that rapid teamwork with your pilot. So over the years here, particularly Sean, my friend that I use for the Fiordland aerials, we just get along really good, and he knows I'm a pain in the butt because it's like, a bit higher, we've got to drop down 1,000 feet here. All right, a little bit left. Now we're going to have to circle around, try it again. And it's all that type of stuff, but it keeps it interesting for those guys. It's a bit different than just doing the middle of the day scenic flights type stuff. So,
yeah, they tend to enjoy being able to go away from the tourist trap route, but...
Oh, exactly. Yeah, break the mold.
What's the going rate for 172 over there, Will?
It ends up being about 600 NZ an hour. Other companies might charge 700 or 800 an hour, depending on where you are in the South Island. Whereas a helicopter, depending on what size helicopter you want, you're pretty much, for an R44, which is the smallest size, you're looking at 1,600 an hour. And then, it just goes up from there, essentially. So, not cheap, mate. So if you're doing aerial photography, my highest success rate in a 1 hour flight is 4 to 5 images. That's like smashing it out of the park. On average, it's probably 2 images, to be honest. So, to charter a helicopter for aerial photography alone, it's got to be for a pretty good cause. Or what I typically do is include stuff like that in workshops, or, whether it's a private workshop with a person, or maybe it's friends and family coming over and I'm like, hey, do you want to split a flight even in the plane alone? So that's how sometimes I'm able to do some of these aerial stuff. It's pretty rare for me to say, I'm just going to jump in the plane by myself today. And I will do that every now and then if it's for a specific image, and I do have a few in mind. But I've had one too many looks from my wife, over the years, where the bill comes in and you're like, the problem is the time, you're paying per minute essentially. So the time just adds up way too quick. And as a photographer, sometimes you just think, just one more, I just want to look over here. And then next minute, a 1 hour flight's now 90 minutes. And if it's a helicopter, that's a lot of money. So
One thing that strikes me about this image is how well you've got the highlights. And was that you obviously can't exposure bracket if you're in a plane like that. So must just be really happy with how you nailed the exposure.
Well, so much of your work, Will, is also shooting straight into light. That was one of my next questions, is how you handle that.
It is. So look, dynamic range, whenever someone asks about camera gear, for me personally, dynamic range is everything. And that's why I've always shot with Sony for the past, 7 years now, because it gives me the ability to basically expose for highlights and recover your shadows. And this was shot on the Mark 1, the A7R Mark 1, with a Tamron lens manually focusing. And so
like to give yourself a challenge.
You know how to do it hard, mate. Yeah.
Oh, mate, yeah. I had a Canon 5D4 during this time period as a backup body, because I liked the 100 to 400 mil lens. And then Sony went and released one 3 months after I bought the Canon 5D4. But long story short, the Sony body was the one that had the 24 to 70 on it. So that's why I got stuck doing this, and the autofocus was playing up. And I don't have those problems now with the newer gear, but I just remember this shot thinking, don't blow this, because you're looking at these crepuscular rays coming down and you're hooning around, and you're like, you've got 30 seconds here to get this shot, otherwise it's going to be gone. But Sean and I, my pilot, we've really started to figure out the conditions to get this type of light and the altitude. There's all these little variables that I've learned over time with aerial photography, just little things to try and consider before even getting in the plane in the first place. Or once I get up in the air, which way am I going to head? And a lot of it is dependent on, cloud and all that type of stuff. So
do you use zebras at all?
Nah, I don't. Look, okay. I just
the histogram.
Yeah, just typically the histogram. But I'm not going to lie to you, I've even gotten lazy, because you're looking at a electronic viewfinder, so you're seeing the live result in the viewfinder. So more or less, if I can see that the highlights aren't blown out just by intuition, just by looking through the I'm typically going off that. But I will have the histogram just in the corner as well, just as a quick reference. But
so I'd imagine that the raw, the foreground actually would have been very, very dark, and so you've been able to pull that back.
Yeah, look, probably pulling, this would be like a worst case scenario, but maybe 2 stops of pulling up the exposure in general.
Yeah, I mean, I guess normally you'd try and do a bracket or something to have a better level of detail in those shadows. But when you're moving in a plane, it'd be hard to put it together. So.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the hard thing as well with shadow detail. If I'm doing a print, I'll definitely bring up the shadow detail. But some stuff, it's like it's that fine line between being what to the eye, this is a pretty dark environment when it's backlit, and it's always that fine line between reality and then showing enough detail. And it does get tricky, but I've never had an issue pointing straight at the sun, and it definitely helps, especially with the handheld photography as well.
Oh, that's great.
Just winter. Sorry, I was trying to just winter on the root burn track here a couple of years ago, and the whole lake was a block of ice. Must have been about -10. Just a real simple image, really, but just a real fun one. And I love the beach forest here that you have. Just utilizing trees and to frame things up is really fun and enjoyable. But this was more just a memorable moment of how cold it was, and seeing the whole lake.
That I really want to get to one day for sure. It looks like an amazing location. And you can walk in the other way too, can't you? From you don't have to go all the way from the Kinloch side.
No, that's right. Yeah, you can just pick a side and go for it. And this was the only time I've been here, actually, funny enough. So I purposely went in just to see what it looked like in winter. And it's a bit dangerous. There's a few avalanche zones and things, but to get there, have the lake frozen over, which doesn't happen every year, that's for sure. It was real icing on the cake.
Where was this again, Will?
It's Lake Mackenzie on the Rootburn track.
Oh yeah, I was going to say this one. It's like, wait a minute, it was just starting to ice over when I was there, because I just
probably ices over on the shoreline, I'd say. But you can
it was just starting to get icy on the shoreline. Yeah.
This is just like this is Long Sound in Fiordland, so one of the more southern fjords right down south. So the mountains don't have that big, drama that is a bit more quintessential up north. But what I'm only looking for with the aerials essentially is just the leading line, the way, S-curves and things like that. And the difference with an image like this between shooting it here versus maybe a kilometer back this direction, it just doesn't have that same type of shape in it. So a lot of the time, this stuff can easily be scouted on the maps, and you can figure out what angle you want to try and line things up and lead the eye through. And this is just looking across on a summer's afternoon, basically. Just sometimes you get in the air, and I don't go in the air if it's too windy. It's just not enjoyable and a bit dangerous. So, but you always have unexpected turbulence. But this was just one of those flights where just no turbulence, just so calm and peaceful. And sometimes it's just, you can't believe what you're looking at. And the fact that you're the only person in the air with whoever's in the aircraft with you, and you're looking at something that no one else in the world is looking at in that given moment, which is true for obviously a lot of places and moments, but you know, a grand scene like this, and you're like, wow, that moment's gone now forever, and we were there just to have a look at it.
What sort of aperture do you use for these oblique shots? Will?
Looking like, just for scouting, do you mean?
No, what sort of aperture do you use?
Sorry, aperture.
It sounded like you said app.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Just depends on the light available. So if I need to, around f4, but the sun is still quite high here, so probably around f7. The main thing I'm worried about is the shutter speed and the ISO. So I'm keeping the ISO always 200 or 100. I very rare will ever have to go up any higher because I like light. I'm not shooting once the light's gone, obviously. So if there's enough light, then you can sit on around ISO 200. F-stop will float between f4 to even f11 sometimes, depending on the light available. And then the shutter speed will depend on the focal length. So if I'm going wider, then I know, all right, I can slow it down a bit here. If I'm getting dark, maybe I'll slow it down. You know, if I'm at 35 mil, then you can pretty much be at 250 of a second and you'll be sharp. Because in a plane, you know, you're moving quick. The window. Yeah, you're moving quick. But if you don't have an immediate foreground, which you pretty much are never going to, then the movement in the distance is just so slow because it's really far off. But of course, once you start compressing with a telephoto, then it all becomes dramatized and be speeding the shutter up again. But yeah, generally, like I said, f4 to maybe f11. And even at f4, because, you know, you're not having that foreground, it's pretty much rendered sharp all the way through anyway, because it's all in the distance. You don't really have that issue, just like in astrophotography, you know, you shoot at f2.8, you're sharp on the stars as well as the distant mountain and even some of the mid-grounds. That's the same type of principle.
Do you have a go-to lens that you do with aerials?
The go-to, I only bought it for aerials, was the Tamron 28 to 75 f2.8. Okay. I would have the Sony one, but I just couldn't justify the extra cash, and it's pretty heavy as well, the 24 to 70 2.8. But it's funny because that lens I very rarely touch on the ground. So 16 to 35 and 100 to 400 is my main workhorses. But then when it's in the air, it's the complete opposite. And I'm definitely sitting on that 28 to 75, 80% of the time. But yeah, pretty much don't need the 2.8 ever, just because I'm shooting once the sun's up, or, you know, it's never in the blue hour, obviously, or anything like that.
Well, the good thing with it being 2.8 is when you shoot at f4, it's going to be a lot sharper than if you're using an f4 lens at f4. So
yeah, you're not maxing out the aperture. Yep, definitely. Yeah, it's a good lens, really sharp and good value as well.
I think that a lot of people like that for video too, from what I've heard.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, the autofocus is a touch slower than a native, but it doesn't really give me any dramas or anything like that. Yeah. Cool. Just a typical Fiordland forest scene here, really. I spotted this tree one time, and I thought, that'd make a nice shot. But when I first found the tree, it was overcast. And I thought, I wouldn't mind trying to line that up with a little bit of afternoon light. And this was one of those lucky scenarios where I just came back a couple of weeks later. I walked into this location and the sun was more or less right there. I got the shot within a couple of minutes, and then the sun disappeared, and it was just all over. You know, every now and then you get a lucky scenario like that.
You've got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, you just got to get out there. And to me, this scenery is what I really enjoy, even when I lived in Australia, just being within a forest environment. You know, photography aside, it's just more that peaceful calm that you can't help but feel when you're in the forest. It's just so quiet, and you're surrounded by just so much fresh life, and yeah, really fun and enjoyable. And this type of scenery is just what we have in the backyard for, you know, thousands of kilometers essentially.
It's very similar to Tasmania in that regard, and I certainly enjoyed the forest scenes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice, and you can just get lost in the forest. And I always say to my clients and students, when you first walk into the forest, it's a bit overwhelming because it's so chaotic. But once you slow yourself down and start to get in tune, I always say the rhythm of the forest, you know, you got to just slow yourself down, and then eventually you start finding compositions, and then you can't stop seeing them. But when you first get in there, it's almost impossible to see anything. But I've found it always works like that. The main thing I was just going for with this shot was obviously the tree shape I just enjoyed. And then in the foreground, the way the light was hitting these front ferns
gorgeous.
was a little bit of symmetry with the background there.
Beautiful shot.
This one here. So this is more of a telephoto perspective on aerials, looking around 300 mil, just off the top of my head, and just showing, you know, Fiordland is such steep, glaciated valleys and mountains, and when you view them from up high like this, the effect that you can get when the light is in the right angle is just phenomenal. And the Māori name for Fiordland is Ada Whenua, which means the Shadowland. And ever since I heard that, I was obsessed with, you know, it just sounds so awesome, so mythical, Shadowland. And this shot was basically my interpretation of Shadowland, essentially. So like I said, looking 300 mil perspective, the ocean is basically here where the yellow is. So just looking west with side light coming in and just picking up all the varied layers running across. But it's taken me a few years to get this image here, how I like it. I've had a few close attempts, but I realized how much like humidity has to come into play, you know, getting the right amount of moisture and haze in the air. You try this in winter on a clear day and you just can't get the layered effect. It just doesn't show it as well. So there's quite a few factors that had come in together to finally get this image. And
it doesn't. There's a spot in Tassie that I like to shoot layers like that, and I remember going back to shoot it and realizing it was nothing like it. And it's definitely not a factor you really consider as much, but it's definitely desirable, at least in that sort of instance.
I don't normally, you know, silhouette things or anything as well, but it just has to be done here. It's just how you show it off properly to layer it all up. And pretty spectacular. It's funny though, because the pilots, I'll be there framing it up and I'm like, oh, you know, this is incredible. You know, I'm pretty vocal and they're probably like, what the hell is he talking about? Because they're looking at that wide perspective. They don't realize I'm looking out on the horizon.
They're not looking at this little. It's interesting what you say about the silhouette too, because if you did recover the detail there, then that would be very distracting. So you kind of want there to be no detail there, so the eye just bounces off it and keeps going.
And that's how visual arts works, you know. It's and that's how nature works. Whatever is closest to you will be darkest, and whatever's in the distance will be brightest. It's just how it is. And that's the hard thing with processing, is you have the ability to change that, but you can definitely go too far. And now you've removed that natural transition from dark to light. The eye will no longer travel through if you've made that foreground too bright. So
it's also got that really nice blue to gold as well.
Yeah, so cool to warm and dark to light, and just those things that want to force the eye to roll on through. It's hard though with this, because I had about 20 different frames, but they're all so similar, and I don't really like to share, you know, too much similar type of imagery. So it was hard to cull through and go, okay, this is the one. And the main reason why I selected this was just having this peak here, just gave a final focal point, whereas some of the other frames that maybe off to the left-hand side only, going vertical, it just didn't quite have that last point for the eye to draw in on. But yeah, that can be hard sometimes with the aerials, that's for sure. Stirling Falls here in Milford Sound. Most people know this location, particularly because the cruise boats go right under, and often it's a pretty popular image to get the water bouncing along the surface of the ocean. This was captured on a day where there was 200 mil plus of rain and just gale force winds, you know, just horrendous winds that would violently shake the boat. And I try to get this close up. This is a 16 mil perspective, so we're pretty close here. And they don't go under the waterfall on days like this. This is about as close as they get. And try to get a close perspective like this for a good 12 months. And the one thing that helped me capture this one was there was just a wind gust at the very right moment, which helped just push the spray off for the briefest of moments. And that allowed me just to get one clean image. But you can probably just see all the spray here. So I basically got engulfed like the very next frame.
Yeah, you must have spent a lot of time that day with a tissue or something on the front of the lens.
Mate, yeah, just absolutely. The old blue towel that I mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
My best friend here, but yeah, the camera. These are the ones where I look at the camera, you get inside and you're like, how is it still surviving? Like it's the equivalent of just spraying a water bottle on it and it still goes. So
do you have like a dry cabinet or anything like that at home, or you just leave it on a shelf sort of thing?
Yeah, no, I just don't have anything, mate. It sits in the car actually.
Well, that's pretty good.
it's all in the car now, and it just kind of sits there. So
yeah, it's all good.
Not the best. If it gets a decent bashing, I'll try and maybe put it inside. I've got a fireplace, maybe put it near the fire or something like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, a bit slack with it all. Aerial perspective here. I just wanted to show you with this one as well a different perspective, because every now and then
it's very low for a plane.
Yeah, helicopter here, mate. One of the rare occasions.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. So that's Mount Tudico, the tallest mountain in Fiordland, and stands at 2,753 meters. Mount Cook is exactly 1,000 meters taller. But when you go to Mount Cook, you're already up at 700 meters elevation. Whereas here, Mount Tudico, you're pretty much down at sea level, more or less. So the vertical relief of what you're looking at is just absolutely phenomenal, and pretty much one of my favorite views. But to view it from the ground, this is more of the perspective you're looking at here. So there's Tudico there, and this is just down on the river flats. And this was that hike that I showed you where I was in the waders and pulling my friend out of the water. That's the type of stuff to get to this type of location.
Is that the river that you cross just a bit before Milford?
Yeah, you cross the Tudico River on the way to Milford Sound. Yeah. So this is about 5-6 Ks just up the valley there.
Okay.
And then, just an aerial perspective here, just a different take. So there's the same type of river leading in. So with Fiordland, and like I said about capturing fresh places and angles, sometimes I will photograph the same mountain, but just from different perspectives, because mountains just offer up so many options. Even Mount Cook, for example, we've all seen a million photos of the Hooker Valley track and the south peak of Mount Cook, but it actually looks phenomenal from the northeast and the northwest and all these different angles. It's very hard to access, obviously. So I've dedicated a lot of time to, sometimes I'll just get fascinated with a particular mountain and want to try and capture it from various angles, because it just looks like a different location every single time, which is quite a bonus, really, that it's one location, but you're just going maybe 5 or 6 Ks left or right, and then it can look completely different. Well, same type of thing, just in Milford there. It was actually the same day, I think, that I showed you that other image under Stirling Falls. Probably the best conditions we've ever had, because you need the wind with the rain and visibility. Really hard to tick all 3 boxes there. Sometimes you might have the rain, but you won't even see the top of these mountains. Sometimes you'll have wind, but it'll be blue skies, blah, blah, blah. So this was just that right timing. And this gust just came through. You need a good gust for this type of effect here. And it was just the right time, just rolling on by, and a pretty unforgettable moment. Good fun.
So you're on a commercial boat when you
just use the commercial cruise boats here, which obviously there's quite a few that operate in the Sound, and they all do the same loop. And I typically just use them whenever I think there'll be good photographic conditions, or they'll be included in workshops that I run. So obviously, but even on the workshops, I try and wait till we got the right conditions for this type of stuff. I've got friends that have boats and we can do this stuff, but on a day like this, you don't want to be in anything smaller than a massive, a big boat. It'd be quite scary actually to be out there.
Have you been to the Faroe Islands? Because some of this is a bit reminiscent of that. I think you'd really enjoy that as a location as well, because when it's raining heavily in the whole thing, just like the same thing. It was
that waterfall. It looks pretty rugged out there. It's just break sea sound, and just really enjoyed the play here with the light. And like I said earlier, just always looking for interesting angles and ways to use the fjords to just guide the eye. This is winter, and got lucky actually. There was a bit of light, a bit of haze coming through, nowhere near as much as what I'd get at, if there was more humidity or something like that, but it was just at the right moment, those last minutes of the day, essentially. Fiordland, like Tassie, once you have that dusting of snow, it just elevates things to a whole new level, and it's hard to not shoot it in the snow after a while. Once it all melts, you're like, it doesn't quite look the same. Helps give you that separation as well in the mountains. But just good fun. Just another simple aerial, really. Wow. This might have been the last time I used the tripod here, guys. 2018, and this was a heli drop. This one just to photograph Coronation Peak. This peak here, pretty much mid Fiordland. This one, and camped at 1,300 meters elevation, and I think the temperature must have got down to at least negative 13 or 14 this night. It was just bitterly cold, but the moonrise was just spectacular. So after the sunset, which was good for this image as well, the moonrise come up, you know, half an hour later, and then the way it just illuminated all the snow and everything like that was unforgettable. And this one was, it was planned in the sense that I wanted to photograph Coronation Peak from this rough area, but then finding this composition in the tree line opening, you can't do that on maps. You know, maps is really not going to help you with a little channel like this. So once I just happened to spot this little stream and the way the peak framed up, I was like, wow, you know, that's got to be the shot right there. So just had the tent not far from where we photographed this, and had the pleasure of waking up to an inch of hoarfrost around the tent the next morning, which was, it was cold. Probably the coldest I've actually camped in. I've been in negative 46 before in Canada, but I wasn't camping then. So, I'll always, when I look at this image, all I remember is just the cold. And it was actually, I don't know, those experiences, they might be a bit rough at the time. And it was rough because I had a summer sleeping bag. So normally fine. Yeah, it was just a fail. It was rated for +5. So I had the knees up to the chest trying to stay alive, basically. But so when I look at the image, it just brings back all those memories, and it's all fond at the end of the day.
It's another one too where you would have really been challenged for shooting into a bright source like that and controlling that too. So that's really nicely done.
Yeah, hard with the dynamic. Yeah, the moon. It's amazing how bright that moon gets. And I was torn. Obviously you could do an exposure blend and put in a moon without the blown out highlights, but it just doesn't look right because you've got all this light hitting the snow and everything like that. So I just let it, be what it was. And the challenge for me with images like this is, making it look like a night image, because you get the raw files even on the back of the camera and it pretty much looks like daytime because you're doing a long exposure with a full moon and it's just bright and blue and it just looks like almost a sunset type shot. So yeah, definitely hard to have that integrity there and just try and portray it the way that it needs to be seen. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think if you try to recover too much of that, you can start to make it look a little bit fake too. If there's too much detail in the moon, it's really just hard to make it work and bring that back.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've alluded a couple of times to not using a tripod, so I guess everyone will be interested to hear your philosophies on that.
Yeah, it just happened organically over the years. There was no definitive moment or anything like that. It might have just happened because maybe I didn't want to set it up one day. And as time went on, I just started to enjoy not using the tripod and just pushing what I could do handheld as far as slow shutters and utilizing the stabilization that's in the Sony cameras, the mirrorless cameras. And it just got to a point where I was getting frustrated if I ever went to the tripod, because for me, just personally, being handheld completely frees me up to explore compositions, get down low, get down high, test shot, check it out, keep moving. And I guess that's just the way I like to operate. And you think about aerials, for example, aerials is all fast moving and you're thinking on the moment. And I've adopted not a similar approach, but the photos I take from the air, like say this one, from the ground, I like to just keep moving. I don't really like to just sit there and go, okay, I'm going to wait for the exact moment, take the shot, and then I'm done. I know it's like I just get agitated and curiosity gets the better of me. So I'll get a few shots and then I'd go, okay, I think I really like that composition, but maybe there's a better tree right up there. So I'll go walk up there, do a few shots there. I like that. And then that's just kind of how my photography is. And sometimes you intuitively know that this is the composition right here. This is what I'm shooting. And maybe I'll go back to that original composition, but just the handheld things just freed me up and just somewhat suits to how I shoot. And I'll just show an example of where maybe there's a slow shutter speed. For example, if bear with me for a minute here. Probably that Tudico one with the river. So something like this, typically I don't mind water. I like water with some of the detail like that, which is going to be 1/10 or 1/8 of a second. And that's easy to do handheld for me anyway. Just stabilize body, slow breathing, nice and relaxed, bang, that's it. It's sharp. Sometimes if I need to get longer exposure like this here, that's like a 1 second exposure. I'll just frame up and get the shot at, let's say, 1/8 of a second, which is sharp. But of course, the water is not what I'm after. So I'll just simply, you could just bracket or just manually just slow the shutter down now to 1 second. If it's starting to overexpose, I'll just close the f-stop down so it's not overexposing anymore. I'll take that exposure, and then just in processing, I can just paint in, just mask in the water. It's all taken right there, same time, same place.
So if the water has motion blur, it doesn't necessarily matter because it hasn't really got that detail anyway.
My water exposure here had blurry rocks. Everything was slightly fuzzy, but it just doesn't matter because I was only using it for the water. And it's just like what you do on a tripod. You'd set up and just shoot various frames for your water in areas, and then you might mask in the splash here and the swells there or whatever. So that's how it's gotten me out of trouble in those scenarios. But pretty much there's just no issue at all. My limitation is I can't shoot in the blue hour, but I just don't. I love light. I don't really photograph astro. I just love light and, the unpredictableness of moving light on the landscape. I really enjoy that, how light interacts with the land. So for that reason, I'm shooting in brighter scenarios, and I can generally get the settings. Every now and then I might have to boost the ISO up. In the forest, if I go in a beach forest on a cloudy day in a valley, then it's pretty dark and you need a slow shutter. So for those scenarios, I'll be at ISO 640. 640 on the camera that I use is just still so clean, and there's no dramas. And then once I left the forest and I'm out in the light again, then it's just no issues at all. So it's definitely something that's really just changed completely. It's literally been that moonshot that I showed you was probably the last time I used one outside of shooting the Northern Lights. So each year I typically go to Iceland to just run workshops and do a bit of photography of the Northern Lights, and that's when I'll dust the tripod off. And then outside of that, I just don't use it. And this one here was probably the last time I used a tripod in New Zealand, for example. And I wouldn't have been able
very liberating.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to get this shot though without a tripod. So, if I didn't take the tripod up here, then I probably would have missed out on getting this shot. But when I went to Patagonia the last time, I just didn't bring the tripod because I had no intention of shooting astro or anything like that. So that's just how I travel now. But it can definitely close off a few possibilities, like something like this for argument's sake. But like I said, 9 times out of 10, or 99%, I'm photographing light anyway. It's very liberating, and yeah, I enjoy it, but it's not for everyone. And I do teach people that come on my workshops. I show them how I do it, and I'd say 50% really adopt it and enjoy it, and then the other 50% they just can't do it because maybe they don't have a stabilized camera, maybe their hands are just too shaky in the first place, or maybe
it could also be as well from a mindset. Like I personally like sitting in one spot and watching it change, and so it's maybe more of a personality thing that's coming into that as well, where some people really like the slowing down part, but I also have times like you where I like to move around as well. So but I think that could be certainly part of it too.
Yeah, definitely. It's more like a methodic approach. Sometimes I'm not always rushing around I'm never rushing anyway, but sometimes I'll just sit, just sit down and just watch the show. And then when the light's right, bang, get the shot. But yeah, I feel like, sometimes the tripod for me, let's say a beach forest, like that image that I showed you earlier on, to get a tripod in this shot, to line up the Sunstar, and I know you would have experienced this, all of you guys, to line a Sunstar up on the tripod is just pain. I think the last time I really tried to do it in the forest, a good 2 or 3 years ago, I think I threw the tripod because I finally locked it in to get the shot with the Sunstar, and then the sun just moved, and now I needed to make a micro adjustment. And it was just like, I'm wasting time here. Like I could have got the shot by now, and that was probably the one that broke the camel's back, essentially. So there's definitely scenarios where I got this shot kneeling down, just on my knees, going right down low. And that's a focus stack, just bang, bang. And now you've got the shot. Or if the Sunstar was too big or too small, just a little bit left and right, bang, bang. And then it's all over. So sometimes it definitely helps. But yeah, it's real. I'm not fussed either way if someone uses a tripod, or even if I had to get a tripod out tomorrow for a specific shot, then so be it. But it's definitely... it's really changed my approach to the way I, photograph in general.
When you do your focus stacking, I'm just interested in that. Do you have a particular technique? Like I've heard one where you pre-focus the, I can't remember now how it worked, but you can kind of do a trick with how you focus initially, and then when you take the second frame, all you have to do is move the focus point, and you sort of framed it up again.
Yeah. So for this one here is so easy. It's just in autofocus.
Yeah.
And I just use I don't use back button focus, so I just use the shutter button, and I leave it on single point in the center.
Yep.
So I just tilt down and half press, so now it's focused on the foreground. And then when I recompose and finally push the shutter, that was the exposure for the front there. So then when
that's when I push it of that.
When I push it again now, it's focused in the background and it gets that one. So if I wasn't talking, it's just going bit, bang, bang, and then you've got your two. If I needed more than two, which obviously happens from time to time, I just flick it to manual focus, leave the focus peaking on, or, you got the distance scale on the Sonys as well. And I might start at 0.3 and just go click, 0.5, click, 1 meter, click. And just, you get a bit of movement, but as you know, you get focus breathing when you're on the tripod anyway with your focus points. So Photoshop can just auto align it, and it's just not really an issue. Easy. And that, if it's low light and I'm struggling with the shutter speed because I'm handheld, I can just go down to F8 and do a focus stack. And now I don't need to do a 1 second exposure or ISO 200. So it's a little bit, sometimes I'm creating more work in the post-processing because I didn't have a tripod out and just shot it all at F16. But it's a bit of a trade-off for me. It's like, all right, I'll save time in the field, and then later on, it's going to take me an extra 10 minutes to piece it all together.
Yeah. Everyone has their different ways, but certainly you'd get more opportunities to get shots because you're moving around so much. So
this was just one of those moments, that you'll never experience again. This is doubtful sound. Really hard to shoot this because the field of view here is massive. The 12mm would have just been gold in this moment, but this is almost 170-degree field of view looking down Hall Arm and doubtful sound. I had to do a vertical panorama to capture the background, which is the rainbow, the sound, everything like that. Then the foreground's just a 16mm focus stack to pick up those plants, because as you can imagine from my vertical panorama, this foreground, if I wanted to emphasize the foreground like this, you just can't do that up close doing a vertical panorama. It's just not going to happen. So this was probably the least fun I've had in Photoshop for some time. Most of my images might be probably average 45 minutes to an hour. I like to process and then let it marinate, go back to it. Like I said, I release new images every 3 to 4 months. So that gives me time to just, I'll do an edit, and I know it's only 70% done, and then not touch that photo for a month and then chip away. So I'd say every photo maybe is an hour, but this one was probably 7 to 8 hours of just trying to stitch it and fix up the warping that Photoshop did, and just absolute nightmare to piece together. But
the rainbow like that, you'd work on it for as long as it needed, wouldn't you? Just to
exactly,
make that work.
And the thing was, the single frames looking just down this direction, which I shot a year earlier just at sunset, that looked great anyway, just having half a rainbow come into the frame. But I almost wasn't going to do the full bow. And then when I actually looked at the files properly, I was like, that's criminal not to try and fit it all together. So it was a tough one to piece in. But mate,
you
just
mentioned 12mm before. Have you been eyeing off the new G Master 12 to 24?
It's funny. I had the existing one for like 3 months, and I just recently gave it back to Sony. And I was like, oh, you know what? If it was sharper and a 2.8, I would get rid of the 16 to 35, and then bang, like literally a few weeks later, the announcement. And I was like, typical, I'd like to get it one day, but mate, the price tag on that is too steep for a poor old guy.
It's out there,
but it's out there. But
given it's got the bulbous front element, this is a bit of a detraction. But for someone like yourself who probably doesn't use filters very much, that's not a big deal at all.
Yeah,
so,
that's it. Yeah, I haven't used filters in a few years, so I would definitely get it as soon as I can, really, because once I started shooting at 12mm, which I only done the last few months, I was like, wow, this is actually helping me in quite a lot of scenes, because sometimes I'm in very steep valleys where the peak is just right there, literally almost above you. And it's really difficult to show that lead in and depth at 16mm, and the 12 was just opening up new possibilities. I might try to borrow it off them and give it a play, but it's obviously going to be awesome. yeah, can't wait. Actually.
Yeah, I've been hovering over the pre-order button, but it's a lot of money to part with.
Yeah, big one. It's funny because I've been so content with gear for years. You know, I just don't look at gear. I just don't have any desire. I have 3 lenses and a body and a spare body, and that's it. And it's just been the same setup for a few years now. And this is the first time in a few years where I've been like, okay, that feeling again, that syndrome where you want to go and buy something new. So yeah, hopefully one day. Yeah, I pulled this one up before. This is Fiordland as well, guys. So, you know, Fiordland has some of the best seascapes in the world. And I dare say the best, you know, these arches here, this is just one of probably 75 sea stacks in this coast alone. And it's a bit hard to see. It's not the best image, but
which section of coast is that, Will?
It's the far south of Fiordland, mate, where it's helicopter access only.
I was going to say, you don't see too many shots from down there,
the
mate.
coastline's just so hard to access.
You know, some of the areas I've walked around here, you're like, there's no human beings that have probably stood in these sections. It's just too remote. And yeah, it's probably the most remote I've ever felt because another human being's 80 kilometers away at the least. But yeah, purely for the sea stacks, it was just evident on the map that there was a lot of sea stacks in this area, and went down with a friend a few years ago, another photographer, and we both just had our minds blown, and we've been back multiple times since. And yeah, it's just, I've got a lot more ideas for down here at different conditions. But to give you an idea, like these archways here, you can stand inside this and you don't even hit your head. Like these are huge at 20, 30 feet. And it doesn't stop. It just keeps going on and on and on for kilometers. It's quite surreal, actually.
Must have been pretty disappointed with the rainbow popping up just there too.
Well, a bit of sweet, Luke, because there was a storm coming up from Antarctica, and we were expecting it to come in at midday. And by, say, 9 o'clock when I shot this, it was well and truly in front of us, just moving closer and closer. And it was like, okay, this is awesome. The rainbow lasted 2 hours, like, to be honest. But the problem is the storm brought along with it 120-kilometer-hour winds. And we never prepared to be there for the night. It was just a morning shoot, and we were dropped off by helicopter. So we're thinking, okay, we're probably going to be stranded now. So we started looking for a cave. We found an old cave, and we're like, all right, we'll sleep here if we need to. But thankfully, the pilot ended up coming back about an hour after pickup time. He managed to sneak in between weather windows and picked us up. And it was a bittersweet moment because you're like, okay, we're saved, but now we've got to have the worst helicopter ride of our lives to get back to civilization.
So you just ducked down there for a day in the helicopter?
In this scenario, yes, because I was with a friend, Mark Adamus, and we had someone else with us as well. So from a cost perspective, it was a bit more achievable to go down and just shoot a morning and then get on out. And we'd shot here about 3 or 4 times prior. So we kind of knew exactly what we wanted to do and achieve. But yeah, this was purely, I wouldn't do that, you know, these days. I've got plans to go down here for a week or so. But yeah, this one was just, let's go down. Mark, you're probably familiar with Mark's work, but he reminds me of me, but he's just on another level where if he gets an idea in his mind, he will not, he's relentless. He just won't stop until he's got that image, you know. It doesn't matter what it's going to cost, what it's going to take, what the sacrifices are. If he wants to create an image or see a place, and it's just nothing will get in his way. And I just laughed, you know, the times I've hung out with him, and especially the first time I met him a few years ago, I was like, man, it's just me, but on another level that, you know, really, you know, I thought I would drop and run at any given moment, but he just took it to a whole new level. And yeah, that's kind of what this was. This was us returning for the 4th time across 2 years just to try and get a better image. We had one image each from this area, and we're like, nah, there's more to be done down here. And yeah, he was willing to make the sacrifice. So yeah.
Awesome.
I'd be tempted to stay down there for a month or so. Well, not a month, but maybe a week, just to make it sort of worthwhile, I guess.
Yeah, well, mate, the problem is, time, you know, time with family and stuff like that. It's just not always easy just to go sit on the beach. And the sandflies here are the worst I've encountered anywhere in the world. So
that's saying something, mate. You should tell people about that, and also some of the mythology around that as well, maybe.
The sandflies.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, people complain about the sandflies, and I do get a bit defensive because they're not that bad, and it just varies throughout the year. So you know, some locations you can go to, let's say Milford Sound, and you won't get a single sandfly on you at all for, you know, you could go there 5 times in a month and you just won't get any. And then there's different seasons and more of the summertime where you can't even get a clean shot because they're just on the front of the lens and they're just driving you crazy. I don't know much about the mythology though. You can elaborate on the Mouldy mythology on the sandfly.
I mean, I'm a bit rusty on it, but it's definitely, you know, an element of protection and guardianship of the area.
Right, okay.
In terms of really letting people know that this is a sacred, special place, and we're here to remind you not everyone is welcome, and you know, you've got to be here for the right reasons to enjoy the place.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's funny because
that's a 25-year-old rusty memory.
No, yeah, it does kind of ring a bell actually. And what's funny is I've developed an immunity to the bite, so they still pest me and, you know, get on my skin and bite me, but I don't actually get an itchy mark anymore. Whereas I'll have clients come over and they'll get one bite and it'll be with them for 3 weeks and it gets infected. And so somehow, mate, they've embraced that, you know, they've let me in a little bit. I'm not getting the itchy bites anymore, thankfully. But yeah, like this place in particular.
You could tie that into the mythology, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
They've
adopted me as a local.
Yeah, they've accepted your intention and your well-being for the place, and
that's right.
Your heart's in the right place, I guess. So yeah.
This rainbow as well, like I said, it lasted literally hours, and to get it in the
rainbow.
Yeah, because the sun is so low on the horizon down here, you know, you're so far south. So the elevation of the sun, it just can constantly keep creating. You got that rain coming in, low sun, and it just sat there. We had about 2 hours of it here. And by the time I got back to Te Anau 2 hours later, there was a rainbow in Te Anau. It's just this southern front coming up with the low lying sun. The rainbow slowly gets smaller on the horizon, but what I was going to say was to line it up perfectly in these arches here. You know, if I saw a shot like this years ago, I'd be like, oh, photoshopped, you know what I mean? Because it's just too perfect with the alignment. But because it lasted that long, I just literally went, oh, I'm going to walk back that way. And then I should be able to get it between those 2 stacks. And then you could do that. And it just got to the point where you just basically pick whatever composition you wanted and, you know, line the rainbow up. We were pretty spoiled on this particular morning. So, yeah. Good memory.
I've seen that once in Canada too, where I just had this rainbow that just wouldn't go away, and you know, every now and then you get those sort of those ones that came through. Yeah,
definitely helps with the low lying sun. Just, you know, this is just classic bush bashing in the right areas, just not far, you know, maybe 1 kilometre, just following creeks and things, which is what I like to do a lot here. And I just love. I remember when I was in Oz in Wollongong, I'd see photos like this from Pacific Northwest in Oregon and be like, oh, I just want to experience and capture a place like that. And I would look so hard in the Illawarra to find creeks and ferns and things, and really hard to, you know, obviously mimic anything like this. And yeah, this is just a pretty, you know, typically a common scene to find here in Fiordland once you find the right areas and don't mind just, you know, like I said, bush bashing a little bit. Quite fun to do. It's actually a vertical panorama, this one, just to fit everything in. It's quite a wide field of view. But yeah, really fun environments to shoot.
Well, we've had a question on the chat just around, or more of a statement in a way, but using drones for aerials in the wilderness areas. I've got my own views on that too, but have you ever looked into doing more drone aerial work, or is that you just
so drones aren't allowed in the national parks at all anyway, and this stuff is 30 k's 40 k's from a road, so you just
still have to get there anyway.
You got to get there. The other thing is, I don't own a drone. I had one years ago. A company sent me one. This is before DJI even exploded, and I had a bit of a play with it, and I feel too much of a disconnect between the photographer and the technology. So when I take an image, I'm a little bit selfish. I want to see with my own eyes what I'm about to capture. I want to be looking at it first and foremost. So if you looked at, you know, this shot here, for example, I just wouldn't feel the same if I was sitting in a car park looking at a screen compared to obviously beholding something firsthand. So for me personally, I just feel like there's a disconnect between the image I'm making and my emotion behind getting that shot. It's just not quite the same. Now, I've seen amazing drone images, and even just for scouting, actually, it's really handy. You could, oh, how's it going to look a K down the river? Fly the drone down and have a look, and then you know. So there's so many perks to it, and I'm not necessarily opposed to drones. I'm opposed to drones when they're used illegally, which happens a lot here in New Zealand. And also, look, I don't like the sound of them, especially when you're in somewhere nice and you got buzzing around. It's not very nice.
It really disrupts people's wilderness values. It's definitely definitely a real issue with the wilderness, and it's just such a piercing sort of sound that people can pick up on it so easily. So,
so exactly.
There's some arguments for it in a way, like it's zero impact on the land, for example. But
well, look, there's less impact than say a helicopter or a plane, which is not good at all. That's an ethical thing that I've had to think about a lot as well, to be honest. When I talk about planes and helicopters, I probably do maybe 20 hours in a plane a year and maybe 5 or 6 in a helicopter. I know, just throwing a rough off the top of my head out there. So it's not like every week I jump in the helicopter or a plane or anything like that. But the main one with the drones for me though is just that disconnect between, I want to look at it with my own eyes and I don't know. It's a bit hard to put into words, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I've spoken to a few other photographers that feel the same way there as well. And, I think, like you're saying, comes down to a personal preference and how you like to capture your own imagery. So like the tripod thing in a way too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. And look, I'm pretty, I do things the way that just suits me, but I'm, especially being a teacher, I have to deal with all different camera brands, different shooting styles and all this stuff, and I'm just saying, hey, whatever does the job here, whatever you're happy with. At the end of the day, it just doesn't bother me too much. I'm not too staunch on my way or the highway. Beach forest here, telephoto shot just in this was like sleet, so a bit of snow, a bit of rain, and then a bit of light breaking through. Just pretty much my favorite conditions to be in, really, and wind thrown in. I just love atmospheric conditions.
You're really good at nailing that shutter speed to get the streaks. I remember your shots that you took in Sugar Pine Forest, and you get those beautiful streaking snowflakes going through.
Yeah, it's hard, mate. I was in the snow last week looking at similar scenery to this, but even more snow, and it was a struggle to the wind helped here. It really helped just get that effect that I was after.
You must have to experiment with shutter speed a fair bit because the snow's not always going the same speed or anything like that.
The rate of the snow, is there wind, what's your focal length, all those things really come into play. And sometimes it's too much streaking, sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes it just drives you mad, to be honest. But no, all good fun. And I just love this. I called this one Endurance because I was recently, when I made this a couple of years ago, reading about Shackleton and his exploration down in Antarctica and the Endurance story, and I just was so enthralled by that story for months and still am. And I just loved all these trees just holding on for dear life. Some of the cliffs that the beech trees just grow out of and hang on, and then this storm, I was like, they're just really trying to tell that tale of the trees just enduring another storm, another of probably many storms that they've been through over the years.
Just had another question too, just in terms of where you take off from normally with your flights. If it's in Queenstown or at home?
Yeah, Te Anau. Queenstown's a pain in the butt because they have restrictions with the airport there. So they can't do a sunset generally and things like that. And just geographically, it's not really the best spot. So most 80% of the aerials I take are Fiordland, and then I do a bit more up around Mount Cook area, whether it's on the west coast or on the eastern side. But Te Anau is typically where I'll fly in and out of. And like I said, have that good relationship with the guys I use. So it's more or less a text, and it could be a text 2 hours before sunset. Say, hey, can we get up? And generally it's a yes, and off we go. So
that's a massive thing, having that close relationship with your pilot and being able to work together. It's can't be emphasized enough.
Mate, it's more valuable than money. Like even recently, I was just running a workshop here last week with 2 Kiwi guys, and we were in an area where I don't normally fly, and just trying to speak to a company to do the stuff that I normally do is just a huge hurdle because you've got receptionists, and then they don't know who you are or what you do. So it's just really hard to kind of say, look, you know, we know what we're doing here. This is kind of what we want to achieve. And yeah, it's just really difficult. So yeah, it's really been fortunate to have that relationship for sure.
Yeah, that's good.
Definitely helps. This is just another one of those creeks. And when I mentioned those floods earlier, guys, that I got stuck in February, unfortunately, I think this area is, I can't even get back here at the moment because the road closures, but this is going to be obliterated because when I drove out that morning, you know, this creek was almost exploding over the road. This is, you know, not far from the road, just a bit of bush bashing type thing. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what all this looks like. And that previous photo I pulled up with the cascades as well. Nature's just always changing the landscape here. So some of those photos just won't be able to be replicated again. Just another layered shot. This was start of the year, and same scenario as before, just, you know, 300-400 mil on the horizon, the right humidity, the right light, just the right moment in time. And yeah, just pretty humbling. And once again, just trying to depict the Shadowland, just how steep and close these mountains and valleys are together.
So, I guess being on the west coast, then you don't do so much sunrise photography. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Or is it...
Typically not. Two reasons. One, sunrise photography, you're almost committed to get in the air no matter what, because you've probably teed up your pilot. Everyone's got out of bed. He's got to the hangar. He's pulled the plane out. And then if you look and there's a band of cloud on the horizon, you're not going to get light now. And you've already teed everyone up. So you kind of have to fly, and you're not going to get the conditions where at least a sunset, you can monitor that sky the whole day. You can assess what's happening and then make the decision an hour or two out from doing your flight. So I found the success rate is so much higher with a sunset. And yeah, I love to look towards the sun, as you've noticed, like all the aerials that I've shown you guys. It's going against what most people would do with mountains. Mostly you want to have the light on your mountain, obviously. So you're, you know, got that warm light. That's a bad example. This one down here, you know, you want to get that warm light on your mountains generally. But I just found with the aerials, I like to, when you're looking at the sun or having it off to the side like this, I love that mystery that it adds to the photo by backlighting everything, and it creates separation as well. When everything's got the light on it, it doesn't have that same type of separation and the sense of mystery too. So shadow is just real. It's a play of light and dark, really. And I just found looking at the sun definitely gets this type of look that I prefer more often. In saying that, though, there are a few sunrise ideas I have, but it's probably more the risk factor of, you know, kind of locking in and then having to get what you're given. But to be honest, guys, I want to work with the moon a little bit with these images here. That's something, and there's only two days per month where that's even possible from a moon perspective, let alone rain and cloud and wind. So hopefully next time, you know, we might chat and I'm sharing new work in another year or so's time. You'll be looking at this, but with a 300-400 mil compressed moon behind it as well. So
that would be incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And it's great to have those sort of concepts and ideas and really work on that. And those sort of things is what keeps the passion and truly on fire.
And in Australia, I do that so much because I had Cathedral Rocks, Bombo, I had all those places there, and I'd be like, all right, I want to get a rainbow cathedral. Now I want to get the lightning, and you'll just kind of work and get it. And in New Zealand, it's just such a bigger canvas to work with. And I typically haven't preconceived too many shots. It's more been geographically based by saying, okay, if I get over here, I think there'll be a good shot. And then I just get there and work with the environment. And generally there's so many things to work with that it's okay. But every now and then I do, like this moon idea I've just told you, I have something to work towards. And one of the images that I'll hopefully share next week in the new release that I do is one of these West Coast ones that I told you how I did, 3 drives up there. That was another one that ate away at me for, a year, just thinking, is it going to be possible? Then getting there and, all right, can I see if it's possible? No, it's cloudy, so I can't even line it up now. And it just drove me mad. So, and yeah, they're real rewarding. But like I said earlier, the spontaneity is probably a bigger part in what I do now to a degree. But you're right. It's good to have those little ideas in mind to just chip away at and have, if maybe one day suddenly the elements align and you go, oh, now I can go to that place, or it keeps it exciting, definitely.
Absolutely.
So I try not to have too many of those shots, because then you can somewhat get tunnel vision and shut yourself off from other opportunities. But yeah, I've definitely always got 3 or 4 up the sleeve, and they might sit there for 6 to 12 months, and then it's very rewarding, obviously, when it all.
No worries. Well, we're probably running a bit long on time now, so maybe one or two more shots if you've got something to close with.
I just threw a random collection in, so I'll just I'll see if there's anything else here particular.
Beautiful mood.
All right. Yeah, oh, it's beautiful shot, mate.
That's Mitre Peak, so the famous, Mitre Peak at Milford, but on the right
angle. I almost didn't recognise it, which I found it really interesting that you chose an angle and a mood, and kind of what's not there is as much as what's there is what makes it.
Yeah, just the rain, it's. I always say I'm a moody guy, I'm a drama queen. Actually, I just love evocative. You just won't see me in the blue sky days or anything like that. It's this type of stuff resonates with me a lot. We'll pick one more, to finish up. Just this one here, another aerial one. And this one, this one was purely just by looking at the map and seeing this massive river kink here in this valley, and just more or less going, okay,
how deep is that?
Yeah, you got all these peaks at the back, which I could see on the topo, and then the river was the main thing that set it off. So then flying in and just lining helicopter, actually, this one. And this is the only perk of the heli, really, is you can slow down and more or less hover there and line the composition up. Whereas obviously in a plane, you can't do that
in a plane.
No.
So straight into that wall.
Yeah, exactly. And we're actually kind of scary close to this wall. It doesn't look like it, but I'm always thinking, how close are those rotors getting to this cliff on the left? But just trying to fit in the waterfall there, and then the S curve, and
must have been frothing when you saw the cloud in there as well. Like
it's just
to tie it off.
Yeah, sometimes that's what I like. Generally, the mornings you get that. This was an afternoon one, but once the temperature drops, it's amazing how quick things can change, and sometimes too quick. And it's like, hang on, the cloud's rolling in now, and the light's not quite there yet, and it all happens so quick. But again, that just keeps it interesting and more enjoyable as well. So.
And that's be another case in point of having, picked out a shot and planned all of the timing and the conditions and making sure the cloud's right and getting a little bit of that alpenglow on the top, and it's all to sort of come together.
Yeah,
it's kind of what you want to do if you're paying, $1,600 an hour or whatever it is. So.
And for this particular ride, it was going, okay, we're going to hit this one. Then we'll fly over here. We'll try this shot. There was about 4 to 5 things that I lined up for the hour. So it was like, all right, we'll start here. We'll try that. We'll try this. And that way you're getting the best bang for your buck.
Absolutely,
instead of just,
it's a good idea.
Yeah, you just, instead of getting in the air and going, okay, well, what are we going to do? You just can't really do that. But you always got to react to the conditions as well. Maybe you go to the spot you think it was going to be good. And as what happened on this flight, the previous stuff, it was like, nah, it's just not really good enough at the moment. The light's not right, blah, blah, blah. And then you move along. So, yeah.
It'd be another good one for that 12 mil and being able to get a little bit
but
wide.
the rotor and then
of course,
the skids, so 16 is probably the threshold anyway.
Okay,
even that's a bit tricky.
Think of
that.
Yeah. Well, tricky. Thanks so much for joining us, Will. That was a real pleasure to talk to you and hear about your process and some of your favorite spots, and just a bit about your, I've always admired your philosophy and how you think about photography and are willing to do things your way rather than maybe how everybody else does things. And that's, a little kind of a unique thing in a way. So really appreciate that, and for joining us. And if people want to see your work, is it best to go to your website? Is willpatino.com?
Yeah, just William Patino.
William Patino, yeah.
Yeah, I go with William Patino, but even though I don't like being called William, but yeah.
Sounds a little bit more...
bit more professional, maybe.
Yeah, professional.
Yeah, William Patino, and Instagram's just William Patino _photography. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so thanks again, Will, and thanks for staying up. You're 2 hours on us, so really, really appreciate it. And do check out Will's work, and I guess they can sign up to your mailing list too, and see some of the releases that come through and all of that. So.
Yeah, definitely. And if you go to the website, there'll be a pop-up. There's like a free tutorial I've got there just on composition, a video tutorial, so you can subscribe to the newsletter. And I'm pretty slack with the newsletters. You're not going to get bombarded, maybe once every 6 weeks if I remember. But yeah, hopefully next week I'll have a good 30 or so images to share. And yeah, I'm actually kind of quite excited about it because I really put a lot of thought into these ones and a bit of, the effort. So yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to the release, Will.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, no, it's as I said, been an absolute pleasure. And next week, our guest is Dylan Toe. So he's going to be, he's also one of my favorite photographers. So I'm feeling very lucky at the moment. And he's going to be talking about Adelaide and some of his process as well. So do tune in for that, because he's another absolutely brilliant photographer. I'm sure that Will's very familiar with his work as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, very excited about that. So yeah, thanks again, Will, and all the best for how things pan out over there. And yeah, looking forward to this release. And we'll sign off and see you next week. Catch you later, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Give me a love to Aotearoa for me, bro.
Yeah.
Thanks,
See
mate.
you, everyone.
Guys.